All right, guys, we've now hit the key topic of the whole evolution of geological time topic, evolution. Um, we're not gonna talk about how new species arise yet. That'll be the next slot. But right now we're going to talk about what evolution is in its most simplest form. Look at this. That's a whale. That's a blue whale. The whales are there for a reason. And that is because with a whale, we have probably the greatest continuous line of fossils than we like for any chordata at all. So whales are awesome. All right. So by the end of this, you want to be able to define evolution, explain the process, explain what natural selection is, and explain the different types of evidence for evolution. Now, remember when we go through this, we're actually going to look at a couple of different types. It's going to be cool. But the evidence for this is so overwhelmingly a large body that you can take all of fossils, throw them in the bin, and we would still have enough evidence to be absolutely certain that this is a real thing. This doesn't rely on one area of evidence. Everything overlaps. And that's part of what makes it a theory, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. Alright, so let's get into some vocab. First, evolution. Everyone thinks they know what it means, but this is what it actually means. It is the change in the frequency, so how many there are of, heritable traits in biological populations over successive generations. We'll stop there for a minute. So it's the change in frequency, so how many of the different traits there are, for example, curly hair. How many people have curly hair? It's how often that, so it's the change in that in one population over successive generations. In other words, an individual organism cannot evolve. It cannot evolve because it is neither a population, so it's only one, okay, and it's not successive generations. So it's like 10% of kangaroo rats have kicked the sand in the animals trying to eat them's face, okay? 10% in one generation. In the next generation, maybe 12% do, because, well, we'll get to why in a second. And in the generation after that, it might be 20%, until eventually most, if not all, kick sand in their faces. So it's a change in that heritable trait over many generations. The evolutionary process gives rise to diversity at every level of biological organization. Okay, so this includes the level of species, so individual organisms, and adaptations. It's really important that you realize that this is the basic tenet behind all biology. If evolution doesn't work, biology doesn't work. It's just, it doesn't make sense. So, this is your definition here. Okay, we'll get to that. This stuff here is just a bit of extra, but this is your definition here. So we need to know what natural selection is. And this is the process whereby organisms better adapted to their environment tend to survive and produce more offspring. Okay, so if we go back to our kangaroo rat, if 10% in generation 1 kick sand in their the animal trying to eat them's face, which means they're going to get away. They will have more babies that survive than the other 90%, which means that the next generation, maybe 15% will have inherited that. Okay? Makes it harder for the animals chasing them to eat them, so it makes sense that the next generation, more of that happens. And then of these 15%, they'll have, again, more babies than the ones that don't. Now, not every kangaroo rat that doesn't kick sand in the face is going to get eaten. Some of those will still have babies. But if you kick sand in the face of the animal chasing you, you're more likely to have babies. So the next generations is up to 19% maybe. In fact, these changes are probably a little too drastic. The changes should be even less. It takes a long, long, long time. All right. So it's survival of the fittest is what we're talking about. But fittest in biological terms doesn't mean the strongest or the fastest. It means the most adapted to a particular environment. So if we look at, say, a sloth, sloth is not fast, a sloth is not strong, but a sloth is, or koalas, actually koalas are better because they're like Australian sloths. They're not fast, they're not strong, but they are the best suited animal to surviving in eucalyptus trees, eating eucalyptus leaves, because they're the only ones who can eat eucalyptus leaves. So nothing chases them, nothing really hunts them down. Bushfires kill a lot of them, but yeah, and habitat destruction mostly. All right, so we're going to look at something called fact, law, and theory. All right, evolution is a fact. It's observable in both the laboratory and in nature. We can model it, we can make it happen, we can see it happen in the real world and in real time. So the fact of evolution is that it happens. The law of natural selection, that's what we we're just talking about, that's the mechanism that drives evolution. Okay? That's the mechanism. So that's the law that underpins it. The theory of evolution is much more detailed. Okay? So it's actually the theory of evolution by natural and sexual selection. Organisms possess heritable traits that enable them to better adapt to their environment compared to other members of their species. And they will be more likely to survive, i.e. reproduce and pass on their genes to the next generation. It makes predictions and explains why they're true. So it predicts that if you are better at evaporating heat off of your body, you'll be better surviving in the desert, and we should find mammals in the desert which are better at doing that. And we do. So let's see how natural selection goes. Here are some birds. It says young green beetles are our favorite, but what it most likely probably is that the brown beetles, I'm going to look at 3 examples of this, the brown beetles are probably a bit better hid on this surface than the green beetles are. So generations later, they're still eating mostly green beetles, but you see that you've got more brown ones. And then over time, the brown beetles are the ones that survive. So if an individual has an adaptation that gives it an advantage over other individuals, often camouflage is a good example, it is more likely to survive and reproduce. Okay? It is said to be more fit for its environment. So in a snowy place, white rabbits are going to be better suited than black rabbits. So more fit individuals will have more children, and their children are more likely to survive because they will have inherited those traits from their parents. So this means that the advantageous adaptations become more frequent, there's that word frequency again, in future generations. Okay? So remember, evolution is the change in the frequency of heritable traits, okay, over many generations. So eventually, if it's really successful, the adaptation will become dominant in a population. Okay? And this is it's natural selection is what gives the change in the frequency of heritable traits, therefore evolution. So natural selection drives evolution. You'll often see on a lot of websites when you read about evolution, some are going to be right, many are going to be wrong. They'll say that evolution is random. Evolution is not random. It is driven by natural selection. Here's another good example. Here we have a grey surface with the grey mice, and along comes the eagle, and he's going to pick up mostly white rats. Now, in reality, he's not going to pick up only white rats, but the white rats are the easiest to see, so they're the ones that get picked up the easiest. And here's an example that will be very similar to what we're looking at. So, I want you to get this diagram down. White moths lay many eggs which develop into caterpillars, so you've got reproduction. Then you've got variation. A moth might be born with a variation that makes it brown. There we go. Competition and predation. Predators are able to see the white moths more easily, and the brown ones are more likely to survive. Now, while many white moths, they don't make it. This does not mean that the white moths disappear. Now, eventually, the moths with brown colour make up a larger part of the species. Now, that's pretty much it. That's the change. So, this is the place to pause, have a break, check your notes, come back. All right, we're good. So, types of evidence for evolution. We look at 4 types of evidence for evolution here. First is fossils. Now, fossils show a gradual change of species through time. We saw that at the beginning slide with the whales. And here we see our ancestors. So we come along, here's Australopithecus africanus, and you see gradual changes as we go along through the millions of years to us now. And that's fossils. We also have comparative anatomy. This is comparing the anatomy of living organisms and fossils. And these are called homologous structures. The pentadactyl limb with vertebrates meaning having backbone, that's actually one of the simplest types. So, for example, pentadactyl meaning 5 fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nearly all vertebrates have these same 5 bones. And you'll see that the bones are all color-coded here, that we all pretty much have the same set of bones. There are variations in it. For example, this one here, it's lost this little part here. It's reduced down. Whales have this. And you can see that there's like little extra bits there. But it's pretty much the same bones. DNA or protein structure. So the more closely related you are to another organism, the more similar your DNA and protein are. For example, we share about 98% of our DNA with chimpanzees. And this is the genes. That's not like the whole thing. So just our genes, we share about 98% with chimpanzees, 92% with a mouse, 26% with a weed. It's about 40% with bananas. That's my favorite. It's roughly 40% for bananas. 76% for zebrafish. Zebrafish, not even that closely related to us. It's a fish. It's a fish. Cool. Fruit flies. 51% of your genes exist in fruit flies. That's crazy town. Bacteria, for the E. coli, in particular, this is the one that gets in your stomach and causes, like, diarrhea and whatnot. This one here has 18% the same genes as you. That's cool. Anyway, but that's how it's one of the ways we know we're related to everything. By the way, this is the one. If this was the only evidence we had for evolution, was DNA, we would still be done. Problem sorted. We've got like a million other types, but that's enough for us to be absolutely certain. But there's more. For example, embryology. Basically, embryos of vertebrates all kind of look the same. And the closer you are related, generally, the longer they look the same. For example, here we've got fish, salamander, they all kind of look the same. Humans, rabbits, calves, chickens. What's doing? Pigs. And you'll see that, alright, so the salamander and the fish, they kind of stay similar for a bit longer, and then they separate out. Whereas these guys at this point, they all kind of look the same. You'd have to really be an expert to identify which ones are which. But you see the chickens and the tortoise, which are actually really closely related, because they both kind of split off from dinosaurs about the same time. They kind of look the same here, where all the mammals all look a bit different. And even here, all the mammals kind of look the same. And that's it. I'll see you in class.